President Trump has issued an executive order allowing mining in space. Dr. Brad Tucker and I dive into this, talking science, story of the week, as our Bradathon week continues.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
Well, Brad, Donald Trump, the esteemed US president, or should I say infamous, he's issued an executive order. Now, I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this, but this executive order is allowing mining of the moon and other celestial bodies. We've talked about this in the past, about mining asteroids, the rich minerals that they contain. This is potentially worth a lot of money to someone.
Yeah, look, space mining is headed, and it's actually one of the key aspects of NASA's return to the moon is to extract resources from the moon, at least in the first instance, ice to help with rocket fuel and stuff like that. The current rules, though, are that with the international treaties, the Outer Space Treaties and the Moon Treaty, as it's called, you essentially can't mine it. And if you do extract resources for scientific use, and you could say space exploration and traveling there could be scientific use, it is not the possession of any one group. It's to be shared equally. And there's lots of debates, and there was just one that ended with Canopus, which is this UN body governing outer space law, back in February, really before lockdown started to take place. And they were debating this bill and what to do. Kind of the old treaties aren't representative of the technology we have. So how do we move forward cohesively? And last week, Donald Trump issued this executive order saying, doesn't matter. We are going to go ahead. You can extract resources. But also, more importantly, there was a bill passed in 2015 by Congress that said that U.S. companies are allowed to mine and keep their stuff. That essentially they were saying the U.S. signed a treaty. We didn't sign a treaty for the companies in the U.S., even though that's kind of what the law says. But now this also says not only can the companies do it, but NASA and government agencies as a whole can do it. So it's going to actually become a really big issue that is not necessarily as appreciated as much as it should be.
Where do you stand on this issue?
I've been part of kind of a meeting working group that we've been having here in Australia about what not only for Australia to do, but how do we work internationally. It's a complicated issue. So, I am not a space lawyer, and there are space lawyers who know a lot more about this. It needs to happen. Mining in space needs to happen. It is going to happen. So that means, in my opinion, let's forward think. Let's think of what could happen and lay the groundwork to make it successful. It is not straightforward as saying, all right, well, you can't mine something and you don't extract anything, or if you do, you have to share it equally. I think there's lots of ways to balance it. However, I don't think it can just be unilaterally decided by one group. I think that's the biggest decision. In fact, I don't even think it should be decided by treaties. I think we could look to things like Antarctica and some of the communication treaties where they started as a treaty and then governing bodies that represented both the countries and businesses and corporations were able to decide as a governing board, review policies, update it. Treaties aren't meant to be updated regularly, right? Treaties are meant to be signed and that's it. They're a treaty. They're not just laws and they're not governing rules. And so I think that's the sort of thing that we need to change so that way we can stay with the technology. Sally Wheeler, who's the dean of the College of Law of ANU, who I've talked a lot about this, says the law should not be prohibitive. It should guide what we can do. And I completely agree with that. We shouldn't prohibit something, but it should help guide what is the best things to do. And we are nowhere near at that decision. I would say the simplest thing I would argue is not every body is equal, in the sense that the way we view the moon and Mars and an asteroid are all completely different, not only in their own individual rights, as we'd say, our perception of them, but also what they have. So you can't just say every law is equal across everything, just as laws on the air versus ground and sea are all slightly different.
I think one of the things that's really interesting here is that it may all be well and good to say, yes, go and space mine, but for a private company, the biggest thing is going to be return on investment. Do you think there are enough resources, say, out in the asteroid belt for someone like I don't know, Gina Reinhardt here in Australia or Twiggy Forrest, for him to go and start up a space mining company or offshoot of their mining company and make a profit off this? Do you think there's enough resources out there?
Oh, there is in the long run. The technology needs to keep up. The money's there. You just need to have, the technology to make it efficient and actually doable. And so the key here is in the beginning, it's all going to be exploration, funded or partially funded by NASA and government groups. So their input needs to be critical. And it's kind of like our talks around private space travel, right? SpaceX is successful partially because they were able to bid on NASA contracts, and it was cheaper for NASA to do it that way. So you can imagine if the government is bidding out contracts and then working with the private companies, eventually that would build enough capital to make it a cheap return on investment, and then start, full scale operations. It is there. I mean, it is not a question in my mind. The money's there, and the technology will keep up. It's when it will happen. It's not a 5-year problem, but we'll start seeing it on the moon because it has to happen. We'll see it on Mars, and then eventually we'll see just full scale operations on asteroids sometime. And it has to be done properly, and it is all about not the technology, but the law, the policy, the ethics, the economics, all this other stuff that has to be merged together and thought of together, which an executive order doesn't do.
On the next Trek Zone podcast, we're going in depth on NASA's most successful failure. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Trek Zone across social media. Just search for Trek Zone and smash that button. On YouTube, ring the bell to get notifications. Give us a like, leave a comment, all that fun stuff. It gives us warm and fuzzy feelings.